Welcome everybody to the first mainline lesson of many in the ToKini Andy Introduction to Japanese Kanji course. If you know nothing about kanji yet, you might want to check out the first 3 introduction videos in this series. But today, we're going to cover the meaning, building blocks, writing, historical evolution, and a story to memorize each of the following kanji. And stick around to the end of the lesson where we'll be doing a quick quiz to help everything stick. We'll be learning these things for 118 kanji before jumping into how to read the kanji. We'll do it this way so that we have more kanji to work with and thus can learn a wider variety of words and readings for each kanji. So let's get right into it. This is the first kanji almost everyone learns because it's easy. Almost too easy. It literally just looks like a 1 on its side, which is exactly what it means. 1. The official radical for 1 is itself, 1. If you don't remember what radicals are, you can learn about them in this video and come back here after that. Anyway, the only part it contains is itself, 1. Easy so far, right? Well, the next part is 2. As with most kanji, we start with the west to east rule covered in the rules for writing video, and write left to right, stopping short at the end. Don't whoosh the tail up or down or anything, it's just a nice straight line. While many kanji have a very interesting historical evolution, and this is the point in each lesson where I'd cover it, one has been pretty much the same for thousands of years. Though there are some variants of this kanji, which we'll learn about some other day. In this historical evolution section of the lesson, I'll usually only go into detail on the historical evolution if I think it'll aid in the memorization of that particular kanji. Which brings us to my favorite part of the lesson, the story. Stories are a wonderful way to memorize kanji and vocabulary. For this series, I've created little stories for every single kanji we'll be covering. Each story utilizes each part of the kanji as well as its meaning so that you can easily memorize it. I recommend adding these kanji with their meanings to a flashcard deck and reviewing those cards daily. Ideally with a spaced repetition system like ANKI or something like that. These stories will help dramatically with remembering the kanji the first few times, after which you'll eventually stop needing them. The story, that is. Not the kanji. You're gonna need those. You can also create your own stories, which may help some of you remember the kanji even easier. But anyway, let's get into our story. For the kanji 1, we're gonna be using the image of a worm. But not just any worm. A fluorescent worm, hanging out on the ground. Officially, the story is one fluorescent worm lying on the ground. From now on, every time the kanji 1 is used in another kanji, we'll use this fluorescent worm as part of the story and image for that kanji. So now you know your first kanji. How does it feel? Are you ready for more? This is how the lesson for each and every kanji will flow. So let me know how you feel about it down in the comments, and get subscribed if you're not already, because we're going to be covering a lot more. For the coming kanji, I will not be explaining each section like I just did, so things will start going a bit faster. Ready? Let's go. This is the second kanji most people learn. It's another easy one to remember, and as you likely already guessed, it means 2. The official radical for 2 is itself, 2. But as I'm sure you noticed, it's basically 2 1s put together. So I like to think of this one as being made up of 2 1s. There are appropriately 2 strokes for 2. We start in the northwest, go west to east, move down to the next stroke, write it west to east, and end in the southeast, just like the rule number 1 of writing I'm always talking about. One thing to note here is that the bottom line is always longer than the top line for the number 2. The story for 2 is simply 2 fluorescent worms on the ground, but the new one is smaller for some reason. It's a good idea to pause the video at this point for each kanji and take a moment to really visualize this image in your mind or to create your own similar story. Make sure to keep the stories relatively simple so that you can reuse the parts in other kanji that they might show up in. Next, we have another simple kanji. This one just has an extra line throw in to give us 3. The official radical for 3 is 1. But in reality, it's made up of a 1 and 2 combined. There are, of course, 3 strokes in 3, and it follows rule number 1 to a T. Keep in mind here that the new one is on top, so we have 1, and then we have 2 below it, so the middle line is always shorter than the top and bottom. For our story, we lay our third fluorescent worm above the other 2. And now we have 3. This next kanji probably seems out of place here, considering we're covering numbers. But this kanji is also a radical or part that we need for the number 4. So before we can learn 4, we have to learn this. In this course, we'll always learn the kanji and parts necessary for other kanji first. Anyway, this kanji means mouth. The official radical for mouth is itself again, mouth. And it's its only part, mouth. There are 3 strokes in mouth. While you would probably expect either 2 or 4, it's important to write mouth with these 3 strokes because it gives it a distinct look. Starting in the northeast, mouth breaks the west to east first rule and goes north to south first. We then draw west to east and north to south in a single stroke, and finally close out the bottom of our box west to east, ending in the southeast corner. I find the historical evolution of mouth interesting because you'll notice that while in modern Japanese, lines extend out below the kanji due to the way we write it, the ancient characters had lines extending out above. To me, the older versions look more like a smiley face. Maybe they were happier back then? To remember this kanji, we'll use a silly little character I created called Mouth. The official story? This is a cute character with a big square mouth, tiny legs and arms. You don't necessarily need a story for kanji like this because it looks like a mouth on its own. But I created one anyway because a character like this makes it easier and more fun to create stories for other kanji that use mouth. If you like this little guy or like this video in general, please be sure to hit the like button. It really helps, I think. This is our first character that is not itself a kanji. It's another piece that we need for the next kanji, 4. It's an official radical that means person's legs. Because it is a radical and not a kanji, there's no official radical for this. And person's legs is the only part. There are 2 strokes in person's legs, and you might remember from this video that we write curved lines starting with the one that goes right to left. Of course, we can also just use the west to east rule for each part of this radical and start with the part on the left and then the part on the right. Keep in mind that the leg on the right curves up at the end, like the pictograph of a toe sticking up in the air, or just a shoe if you see that better. That's what it looks like to me. The historical evolution for this character looks kind of like the legs of a dancer with their arms in the air doing some kind of performance, which is why the story for this radical will be 2 sexy person legs making a pose. Which brings us to the final kanji in this lesson, the number 4. The official radical for 4 is mouth. It contains the parts mouth and person's legs. You might remember from the rules to remember how to write kanji lesson that when there are things written inside of our mouth kanji, the mouth or box must not be closed until everything inside is written. So we draw the first 2 strokes of mouth and then draw the sexy person legs inside the mouth. It's important to note here that they connect to the top line. Finally, we close our mouth. Interestingly, 4 used to be written with 4 lines, following the same pattern as 1, 2, and 3. But at various times in history, we can see that it was sometimes written as some legs coming out of a portal in the sky? For some reason. Our story for 4 is 4 of our mouth characters from before, with 4 of sexy person legs in their mouths, for some reason. I mean, they're giant mouths. They're always hungry, I imagine. Which brings us to the Lesson 1 quiz. In this section of the video, I'll show you a flashcard with the English meaning for each kanji. Pause the video when we show each card and try to remember how to write that kanji. Then, write it on your hand with your finger or on a piece of paper. The best way to remember kanji that you just learned is to search your memory for the story that you used to memorize it. That might be the story that we taught you, or the one that you made based on the English meaning for that kanji. Our first card is 1. Next is 2. Just a few more. Here's 3. And then there's mouth. Finally, we have 4. Let us know how many you got right down in the comments. You can learn the next 5 kanji by clicking on this video, if it's already out. If you don't want to wait, you can continue learning with the official Level 1 ToKini Andy Kanji Flashcard deck for ANKI on ToKiniAndy.com. We're also releasing kanji series videos early for all the members there, so check it out if you want a head start.